Welcome to Book Spotlight, and today we're going to be looking at the first book in the Axiom-man saga. This was the original release. This is the 10th anniversary edition, which we'll get to a little bit into the spotlight, so just hang on a second. But yeah, for this first book, this book was written, I started writing it in January of 2006 and finished it, I think, around end of June of that year. And the idea was I wanted to write two things. I wanted to write one, it's a story, a huge superhero saga. So that's why the series is called the Axiom-man saga. It's more than one book, and it's a big series. It's meant to be 50 books total. I have 8 done, but it's also meant to be a kind of legacy writing project, meaning it's supposed to take place, like I'm supposed to write it over the course of my life, so that when I sort of retire from writing or take a break from it or go on a hiatus, then the series will be done and I'll be a much older person at that time. But it'd be this saga to leave behind as sort of my mark in the fiction world, as well as, something for my kids to have, and also to look back on their dad upon and say, like, my dad wrote all these books. He wrote this huge saga about a superhero. And so the Axiom-man saga starts here with the first self-titled book, Axiom-man. And how it originated was I wanted to write out a superhero fantasy that I had in my head since I was a kid. When I was 9 years old, I got my first job, and that was a paper route. And so I'd go door to door and deliver the papers. And early mornings, you're out there by yourself. It's very, very quiet. Everyone's sleeping still because you had to deliver quite early. And so as I was going from house to house, I started playing this, because I'm a superhero, and I always have been. So I started playing this superhero fantasy in my head, with me as the lead, of course, and why not, right? But yeah, so I had this story that I developed over a few years of doing this paper route, and each morning was like a new adventure, So what I decided to do was take that story, take the first piece of it, and make a book out of it. And what's also interesting about the time that Axiom-man came out, again, this is back when the publishing industry as we know it today, like very digital, and on demand. This was back when that kind of thing was in its infancy. So at the time, besides your mainstream superhero novels, like I'm talking Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, they had novels for those. But in terms of independent superheroes like Axiom-man and others, I'm not kidding, there was maybe a half dozen of us total. Now, if you were to search for superhero fiction, you'd find just loads and loads and loads of independent superhero fiction. But back when this started, yeah, I was one of a handful of people who had their character out. And it was an honor. It was a pleasure. I mean, Axiom-man, when it first came out, got a lot of attention. It was in the newspaper, got on the radio, TV. There was, book signings. It was a hit at conventions, especially locally, because my saga takes place in Winnipeg, where I live and have been born and raised. And so this first book, the second influence on it, aside from the paper route fantasy, was actually Watchmen. The idea of a down-to-earth superhero who may have some special abilities, but ultimately is just a guy in tights. And when I created Axiom-man, like, the version that was in my head was a lot more powerful than he is here. Like, Axiom-man can fly, he has super strength, and he could shoot energy beams out of his eyes. And he also has the ability to turn his powers off and on. So, like, when he has them off, he's just like you and me. Like, he can't fly, he can't shoot his energy beams, that kind of thing. But then he activates them, and that's when his hair goes blue, eyes light up with this power, and then he's able to use his abilities. So that's sort of a thing I use to help also with the secret identity, because even if he didn't have a mask, when he activates his powers, you know, I mean, your eyes are going to glow all blue, your hair is going to go blue, like, you're not going to be recognized anyway, you know. But anyway, so I wanted to create a vulnerable hero. I wanted to create someone who can get hurt. I mean, if you took a gun to him, that's it, it's over. He's dead, you know. Even knifing him in the right spot, yep, it's over, it's done. His costume, as described in this book, is basically like a tight-fitting suit, but the light blue diagonal piece across his chest is just made of a tougher fabric, so that if he, you know, scrapes it along something or scrapes along the ground in a fight or whatever, like, he's not gonna just tear his outfit off, you know. He's got some protection in that context, but it's very minimal. But anyway, back to the book. So this book here is sort of like a two-parter in one. It has segments that say 4 months earlier, and that's the origin piece. That's where we learn how he got his powers, how he tested them out, how he discovered what he can do. Because when he got his powers, he basically got his powers, but was never told what they were, for starters. So he didn't know what he can do. And secondly, he didn't know what they were for, right? So he had to experiment and figure out, okay, I could do this, but I can't do that, kind of idea. So that's part of the book. It's 4 months earlier, flashback segments. And then there's the actual story that takes place in the present day. Well, not obviously 2023, but present day back then when I wrote it. Axiom-man is 24 years old. He works by day as a call center agent, doing customer service. And of course, whether it's day or night, if there's trouble, Axiom-man shows up. So this book gets into that duality of this character. He was a normal guy, and then the powers thing happened. And when he decided to become Axiom-man, he decided also to become something else in his personal life as Gabriel Garrison. He ended up creating a persona around Gabriel, and changed his personality style, his demeanor, and became more of this nerdy geek kind of guy, versus the strong, you know, Axiom-man. So the idea, of course, being that people wouldn't associate him with being Axiom-man. And that's a superhero trope, yes, but it's part of the story, because down the road, not to give away too much, he regrets that decision. He finds himself in a place where he can't even be himself, because either he's going to be Axiom-man and he has to be on as Axiom-man, or he's got to be Gabriel, and around people he's got to be on as Gabriel. So for him just to, you know, kick back and relax and just be him, that's a tough one. So anyway, this story introduces, of course, Axiom-man and Gabriel Garrison. It also introduces character Oscar Owen, a guy by the name of Gene Nemec, and Axiom-man's love interest, Valerie Vaughn, who won't give him the time of day no matter what. So there's that. And then, of course, we introduce the main nemesis for this first story arc of the Axiom-man saga, Redsaw. And that's how the Axiom-man saga works. It's a giant story arc, but each volume is written independently, so you could jump in at any point and have a full story, beginning, middle, end, and you're okay. But if you want to get the overarching story, then yeah, you got to start at the beginning and work your way through the series. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the synopsis on the back, and then I'll talk about the 10th anniversary edition in a second. Okay, so starts off saying, one night Gabriel Garrison was visited by a nameless messenger who bestowed upon him great power, a power intended for good. Once discovering what this power was and what it enabled him to do, Gabriel became Axiom-man, a symbol of hope in a city that had none. One night, after a routine patrol, a mysterious black cloud appears over the city. Flying over to investigate it, Axiom-man is stopped short when the cloud's presence shakes him to the core, An electrifying fear emanates from the cloud, and he can barely get near it. Quickly, the cloud takes flight and leads him on a wild goose chase throughout the city, only to flee from him in the end. Almost immediately after the cloud's appearance, a new hero arises, Redsaw, clad in a black cape and cowl. The people, now enamored with this new superpowered marvel, seem to have forgotten about Axiom-man and all he's done for them. Except something's wrong. That same fear that emanated from the cloud drips off Redsaw like a foul smell, and Axiom-man can barely get close to him without feeling ill. What is Redsaw's agenda, and who is he? And why is it every time Axiom-man gets close to him, it feels as if his powers are being sucked away? As if that wasn't enough, Gabriel's day job hasn't gotten any easier. His co-worker and the woman he adores, Valerie Vaughn, has little interest in him, and his boss has made it clear that one more day late to work will be the day he cleans out his desk. Then there's the new trainee, Jim Nemec. What is his fascination with Redsaw, and why is he never around when Redsaw appears? From flying over city streets and soaring at dizzying heights, to balancing a secret identity with destiny, Axiom-man must discover what Redsaw's presence means and how it ties into the messenger's life-altering visit before the city and the world are enamored with an evil that has haunted the cosmos since the dawn of time. And that's the synopsis and the storyline for this first Axiom-man book. So remember, that came out in 2006. So 10 years later, in 2016, I decided to release a special 10th anniversary edition of the first novel. It's called Axiom-man 10th Anniversary Special Edition. It's constructed a little bit differently. As you can see, it has similar covers. I wanted the same pose on the cover, but just done slightly differently. Again, as a way to commemorate the first edition. So the first, all the Axiom-man books are done, the covers, that is, are done by artists Justin Schaff and Kyle Zajac. So special thanks to them for doing such good work. And then this special edition, the cover painting was done by Jeremy Scott. And Justin, Kyle, and Jeremy and I all went to animation school together. So that's how we know each other. And Jeremy's taken more to painting now than drawing comics. And so he drew this, or painted this really, really beautiful picture of Axiom-man that a lot of people adore. I also gave the cover a matte finish instead of its standard glossy finish, and that just adds to the overall pleasant aesthetic of the book. So again, it's the same story, it's the same book. There's some differences though. The difference is, one, I took the story and I went through it again, and I adjusted a few parts and tweaked a few sentences and just made it flow a bit more smoother, because by the time this came out, I was a more experienced writer. So I wanted to have something more, smoothly done. And as well, this book contains some extras, special extras. It has a special short story called Char, and that story takes place right after the events of the first novel. And that story is only available in this special edition. You cannot get the short story anywhere else. And then likewise, it contains an essay by me called The Axiom-man Origin and Why I Write Superhero Fiction. So that's in there. And then finally, there's an introduction introducing the book, introducing Axiom-man, and introducing the special 10th anniversary edition of it. And that's the story. That's Axiom-man. If you were to compare him, if you need a mainstream hero to compare him to, I would say if you took Superman, Nightwing, and Spider-Man, put them in a pot, mix them together, Axiom-man is what would come out. And this is it. These are the books, and I really hope you check this series out. It's gotten a lot of good reviews. People love it. They come up to my table at conventions asking for the next installment. If there's a new installment available at my table, like, I could tell they immediately snatch it up and then say, how much for this? So it's popular. It's a good series. At least people think it's a good series. Of course, I'm biased too. I think it's a good series too, because that's my thing. But regardless, yeah. So this is Axiom-man, and that's the first novel. And I really hope you check it out. I hope you enjoy this story. And if you're a superhero fan, you know, I try to to tug at the right chords when it comes to that, you know. And lastly, actually, one final note about these books and the saga as a whole is I wanted to create a superhero that takes place in the real world, our world, and the idea being, if he suddenly showed up tomorrow, what would that be like for him and for us? And how would that storyline most likely play out in a real life stream of time, real life, you know? So anyway, that's the first book in the saga, Axiom-man. Hope you check it out.